Welcome to the Grow Fast podcast, where we talk with leading sales, marketing, and personal growth experts about how companies can accelerate sales, optimize marketing, and grow their businesses fast. Let's go.
Hi, Eli. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm up in Seattle. I believe you're also on the left coast as well. Down in Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, although I did spend some time in Seattle.
Yeah? What were you doing up here?
I was at Amazon for a couple of years.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
The main office downtown here, or?
Yeah, this was before, where is it now? I forgot the name of but this was back when it was like in actual downtown.
Yeah. I mean, it's South Lake Union is primarily, but they've got people all over the place. I was just reflecting, I'm in an Airbnb in Ballard right now. That's a whole other story why I'm here. But, I way back in, I think I went to elementary school in Ballard, and just walking around here, Ballard, Lake Union, the whole Fremont, the whole area has changed. And Amazon was one of the biggest catalysts for that change. So amazing. What's it like in LA? It must be really hot down there right now.
Yeah, it's not so bad. It's, it doesn't ever get too hot down here, but I guess it depends what part of LA. But where we are, it's not so bad. But it's nice. The summer, kids are home from school, so it's all good.
Awesome. What's it like running a startup in LA? I mean, California, people think the Bay Area. Is there a large startup community in Los Angeles?
There is. It's pretty sizable. I mean, LA is just such a big city, and there's definitely a lot of tech here, and we've got some great colleges that feed into it, like Caltech and UCLA and USC. Yeah. The thing that makes it a little bit tricky is just because it's such a sprawling city that it doesn't always feel quite as big as it is, because it's almost like a few little sub communities. Mm-hmm. And so I don't get to see everyone quite as often as I'd like. Like, I remember when I was in Seattle, there was just a lot more concentration. So it felt bigger than it was, or at least compared to what LA feels like.
Yeah. So last year I went to Tech Week in Seattle, Tech Week San Francisco, and Tech Week LA. And LA is definitely more spread out than Seattle or San Francisco. Thank goodness the organizers organized most of the Tech Week events in the Santa Monica area. So, you could kind of, pick a hotel there, camp out for a few days and hit a lot of events. But yeah. Hey, I'm looking forward to talking to you about some of the best practices around collecting and acting upon customer feedback in the context of when you're running a B2B SaaS company, because it's really important, and I'll let you explain why and how and all that, etc. But before we do that, maybe you can just take a couple seconds to talk about some of your exits. I think you've got close to $70 million in exits, or you've been a part of exits that have been worth about $70 million bucks, and going through that process, you've probably seen a lot. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your background and what led you to found Back Engine.
Yeah, absolutely. So the early in my career, I mentioned I was at Amazon, and I spent a couple of years there, and it was a really cool experience, but it never felt like my passion. And I think part of it is just like being in a big company and feeling like we live in this really unique moment in history where you can basically just grab a few people and build some technology and change the world in some way. And that to me was invigorating and just absolutely, like, there was just a huge gravitational pull for me. And so as soon as I could, and I was able to raise enough money that I could basically leave Amazon and not have issues, I did. And I started this company called ThinkNear with a colleague from Amazon, an engineer from Amazon. And, we went through our ups and our downs trying to figure out what we were going to be. And we had to learn a lot of things along the way in terms of just how to build a startup. But we got very lucky in that we started a business around location-based advertising right as the mobile device was, like, the iPhone was becoming really, really ubiquitous, and it had a GPS chipset in it, and every advertiser was trying to figure out how to advertise. And so even though we made a lot of mistakes and we didn't really know what we were doing, we built some good tech and we hit on some big tailwinds. And so we were very lucky that within 18 months of starting that company, we were acquired. And I'd like to say that I learned a lot of lessons from that experience. The problem is when an exit is so fast, it covers a lot of mistakes. And when you have so much momentum and tailwind, it covers a lot of mistakes. So it was almost like I didn't learn that much from that experience because I didn't have a sort of a feedback loop to know what I was doing that was working, what I was doing that wasn't working. And part of the beauty of something like that is you tend to think it was really easy and you're really good, which I did. Yeah. And so
I must be good at this startup thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the acquiring company wanted us to be there for 2 years. So after 2 years, literally the day after the 2 years, I left and I said, I'm going to try my hand at this again. And this time, the basic idea around the company was, hey, there are all these new digital data streams that are being created as we move from an analog world to a digital world. So all of a sudden, we're all carrying phones in our pocket with GPSs. So now all of a sudden, there's location data that theoretically is available in an anonymized way. And as we move from cash to credit cards, there's now all this like data around how much people are spending and on what. And I thought to myself, if we can grab these different digital data streams and bring them together, we could theoretically power real-time dashboards that could help retailers and restaurants and all sorts of businesses better understand their consumers. And so we started to build that and, again, grabbed some of the early team from ThinkNear, and we started working on it and started to iterate. And man, this was a much harder journey. This one required some grinding. And there were a few reasons for why, but we didn't have the same tailwinds at all. We actually had some headwinds just around like everything we were doing was anonymized and aggregated. And we were trying so hard to be 10 steps ahead of wherever like the line is around privacy. Mm-hmm. But because there was no real clear guidance and no real regulations, CCPA didn't exist there. It felt like the ground was constantly moving on us, and that created just a lot of different friction for us. And it was a hard business to build, but the core product was really powerful. And we started to sign up some of the biggest businesses in the world. And we started to feel like we were having some success. And after 6 years, we were acquired by Medallia, which is a voice of the customer company that basically looked at us and said, oh, this is cool. Like through surveys, we're able to really understand consumers when they're in the four walls of a business. So if you're a hotel and you send out surveys, you can understand your customers, what they're thinking, what their experience was. But we can give no visibility into what's happening outside of those four walls. And here's this company, Sense360, that because of all these new cool digital data streams is actually able to understand what consumers are doing everywhere. If we marry the two, there's probably something really cool. And so they acquired us. We joined. I spent a couple of years there and then started Back Engine. And so not to go into too long of a like a monologue here, but the basic idea around Back Engine is the hardest thing about building these two B2B companies, ThinkNear and Sense360, was that when we were small, I felt like I had a superpower. I knew exactly what our customers needed, what they wanted, what would drive value for them. And as a small little team, we were all on the same page about exactly what to do to make sure we delivered value and built a great experience for them and a great business. But as we started to scale and add more customers, by definition, we had to scale the team. We had to bring in sales teams and account management teams and customer success teams and implementation teams to work with our customers. And that meant that me and everyone else started to get further and further removed from our prospects and our customers. And we started to make bad decisions. And when I got to Medallion, I saw how B2C companies were using surveys to try and narrow that distance and to start hearing from customers directly. I thought to myself, this is really cool, but maybe for B2B businesses, surveys aren't the answer because they don't have enough businesses and they don't get enough responses to get meaningful data. But what if we take some of the playbook from Sense360, which is look at the digital data streams and analyze those to understand consumers? What if we did that for B2B business? What if we used the emails and the video call transcripts and all of that to really understand what customers were saying, and without having to ask the B2B, the end business user, whether they like the product or not and how they're using it and what's working, what's not, we could just glean all of that from all the things they're already telling their vendor and basically build a totally new way of looking at customer feedback. And so that's what we've been building.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I want to definitely find out more about how Back Engine does all that. But before that, I would like to say that, I'm running a B2B startup right now, a SaaS startup. But I've also worked most of my career in B2B sales. And it's always a challenge to get accurate feedback, customer feedback, because you can go through a couple different channels. You can have salespeople who come back and say, hey, we really need this integration, or we really need this feature. And, if you're running especially if you're running the development team, you're like, whoa, hold on. What do you mean we really need? And like, no, the customers are saying it. And so you have this just never ending, I would say, friction between your sales team, maybe a little bit of your marketing team, because they're doing product positioning as well, but definitely with the dev team, because they have the resources and the budget, and everything's, has certain limits there. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how important it is for somebody who's building a SaaS platform to kind of manage those two competing requirements.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little story from my Think Near days. We had a seller who was incredible. He by far outsold almost the entire team on his own. And every now and then he would come to us and he would say, we have to build this thing, exactly like you just said. And we would go and build it and no one would ever use it. And we started to realize that, part of what made him a great salesperson is that he was both very persuasive and he was aggressive, and he had a lot of traits that make someone a good salesperson, but he was using that to basically be a squeaky wheel internally and shift our roadmap in a way that was not helpful or strategic. Mm-hmm. And that was a big aha moment. And what I really learned is that, because we're disconnected from our customers, we have to rely on these intermediaries to tell us what it is that those customers want and need, and what those prospects want. And almost always that intermediate party is not giving us the correct story, either because they're squeaky wheel, either because they're dealing in anecdotes, either because they have recency bias, either because they're very focused on the sale and not necessarily the other parts of the experience. And so we end up making really costly, bad strategic decisions. We acquire the wrong companies. We build the wrong products. We focus on the wrong things to fix. Like, I'll give you an example. Every company does a win-loss analysis, right? Like, you have to understand why you're losing deals. Did you know that 85% of the reasons that salespeople put into the CRM for why they lost a deal are wrong? If you ask the buyer and you ask the seller, they will mismatch 85% of the time, which means that we're spending all this time doing these win-loss analysis and spending time talking to the sellers, and we're then solving the wrong problems because that's not why we lost deals. And so we then ask ourselves, why we heard this, we did this analysis, we went and revamped our whole thing, and we're still losing deals. And it's because you have this intermediate. The same thing happens on the customer side. 7 out of 10 times when a customer success manager tells you why someone churned, it's different from what the customer actually said and intended. And so it's just everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah. The customer drives everything we do as a business. There's no other reason we exist other than to ultimately deliver value to the customer. And yet, as leaders, as product managers, as marketers, as executives, we're so disconnected and we're hearing the wrong things.
Well, it's interesting. You started off your response by saying wants and needs. And I like to differentiate between the two, because you might want something that's great. It's a nice to have on a scale of 1 to 10, and even how you respond to that, we have to take it with a pound of salt, because, just because you want it doesn't mean, and if you don't get it, doesn't mean you're going to walk away and go to a competing platform, right? So you really got to drill down on that. But oftentimes when we're talking to customers say oh, we would really like it to be, do you like it if you have this feature? And whenever somebody says, when they identify or name a feature, we immediately take a step back and drill down what it will tell us, explain to us what you're really trying to accomplish there. Because they might have an idea that they need that feature. Maybe there's a way to accomplish their objective without even building that feature, right? Just, but salespeople a lot of times are, in my experience, and I've been guilty of it myself, are kind of afraid to drill down. Either they don't have that SA kind of mindset, or their knowledge to be able to drill down, or they're afraid of pushing the customer, right? So, but you have to, I mean, if you're doing a consultative sell, you've got to be able to understand what are their real underlying needs there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, because I want to lead this conversation to how you're actually able to accomplish that with your platform. But let's talk about the importance of actually understanding what a customer wants versus what they say they might need or want.
Yeah, I love this question. And I think one of the famous stories everyone knows about when people talk about feedback is the Henry Ford story around or the quote where he talked about how he didn't ask customers. If he had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And right?
It's been a long time since I heard that, but that's awesome, man.
It's awesome. But I think people draw the wrong lesson from that example, because I think the lesson people draw is customers don't really know what they want. And they then point to like Steve Jobs, who had similar feelings around the iPhone, around like how like consumers couldn't even conceive of the fact that they could have this like piece of glass that would basically be their portal into the entire information that's ever existed in the world. But I think that's the wrong lesson, because I think if you really listen to what Henry Ford is saying, is he's saying they identified the problem they wanted to solve. They wanted a faster horse. They wanted to get there faster. They wanted to get from point A to point B faster. That is the problem.
Right.
But the solution they identified was wrong. It wasn't a faster horse. It was a faster car. And I think the lesson to draw from that is customers are really, really good about highlighting the problems that they need solved. They're really good about identifying the things that are causing them pain. They are really, really bad at articulating how to solve that pain. They don't have the context. They don't have the imagination. They're not spending enough time thinking about it. Our job is to understand where is the pain, where are the problems, and then use our understanding of the systems that we're building and the vision that we have to solve it for them. And so when I think about customers and their feedback that they're giving us, I agree. Like you almost shouldn't look at what features they're suggesting, but when they talk about their features in the day-to-day conversations, in the rapport building that they're doing with all these different teams that you spin up to talk to them, they are telling you their problems consistently and often. We see it all the time. And sometimes they also add in the features, but they always talk about their problems. And so I don't think this requires additional training or telling the CS team or the sales team or anyone how to dig for that. I think they're telling. What it requires is better listening, which is a very hard skill to teach and which we automate for the business.
Wow. So let's talk about that, because first off, if the customer doesn't actually know what they know what they want, but they don't know how to articulate it. So how are you able to pick that up? And two, how does your platform, how can it be a better listener than just your typical customer support or salesperson?
Yeah. So let's start with the second part and then go to the first part. So how do we listen better? Well, it turns out that listening is very, very hard, because as humans, we're very bad at multitasking. And when we're on a call with a customer, we are very, very focused on driving towards a specific goal. And our goal is specialized. Like if I am an AE, my goal is to close you. And so I am listening from the lens of what do I need to do to handle your objections and to move you along my process and to convince you and persuade you and to figure out what your problem is to solve it. Like I have that lens on. And so to ask that AE to, in addition to that, get really good at listening to signals related to product problems, and to be really good at listening to messaging, and to be really good about listening to competitive threats is not fair. It's not fair to the AE. They're not trained in it. They're not incentivized on it. They're not focused on it. They're very focused on what you are actually asking them to do. And so it's very easy for the customer to say something subtle and for them to miss it. The way our system works is it understands that there are multiple roles and multiple lenses at a business. You have executive, you have marketing, you have product, you have operations, you have finance, you have sales. And we look at every interaction with every single lens being its own separate flow. So the product lens is listening to that conversation and looking for all the things related to the product and grabbing and categorizing them and analyzing them. And the sales one is looking at it from the perspective of sales. And so in that way, you don't have to bring in the 7 people and have them all listen on that conversation. You basically have these extensions of you that are doing that for you and making sure that you are not missing these nuanced things. Because what we see in these conversations is that customers flag the problems. They consistently flag the problems that they're having. And most of the time it's just that people miss it. So they might say something like, going back to that Think Near example and the feature they were asking, they were saying, this is so frustrating that I can't do this. Could you please build out this integration? And that integration was just not something that would solve the problem the correct way, but it's where we went. Or probably the biggest product misstep I've ever had is we built this dashboard that we thought back at Think Near that they really, really, really wanted. And we went out and we built, and we spent 6 months building it. And so we spent $150,000 in designs, basically building these dashboards. And what we found was that no one ended up using them. No one. And this was like a massive, massive bet for us. And like no one wanted them. And so I went back and I started interviewing customers and trying to understand like why they weren't using it. And what I heard from them was the problem they were having is our customers were agencies. And what they needed to do was they needed to report on campaigns that they were running on our platform to their customers. And what was really painful for them is that grabbing the data and formatting it in the correct way to send it back was not easy and was taking them a huge amount of time. And a dashboard doesn't solve that. They were just saying, I want easier access to take this and send it. And they were telling us like the problem all the time, but they were also telling us the solution is like, I need this dashboard. Our team completely missed the problem they were trying to solve, fixated on the solution. We built the wrong solution, and we messed up. It was expensive, really, really expensive.
And you learned a lesson.
I did learn a lesson. I turned it into a business.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that example because it's so true. And especially, I don't want to point the finger at anybody, but like, we were talking about salespeople. I also think that a lot of times dev people, they have their way of, I know how we're going to solve this problem. I know how we're going to do it. And because they're kind of geeks in terms of what they do. Right. And it's like, sometimes I don't know if they're overthinking it or they're thinking about it from how cool the solution is versus how the end user is actually going to use it. Because I'm a huge believer in usability. Just keep it super simple, intuitive, easy to use. Because most people, everybody's got to deal with multiple different platforms and tools, and very few of them have the time and to become a subject matter expert on your particular platform. So make it easy. Don't make people like me feel stupid. So let's talk a little bit about how you actually, what are the different channels that you're able to kind of capture to collect that signal?
Yeah, so we're looking at all the places where conversations with customers are happening, and so we really try to get primary sources. So we're not pulling notes that a AE put into the CRM, because then you're back to the same issue around bias and squeaky wheels and all of that. So we go straight to where the conversation happened. And usually that happens in one of a few places: video calls. And most companies are recording those calls now and using like video recorders. So we pull those transcripts. There's a lot of email back and forth. So we pull those emails. There's support tickets that come in. So we pull those support tickets. Some people are using Slack as a channel to communicate with customers. So we pull in Slack as well. And those are the primary sources. We have others that we pull in as well. Like for instance, like product usage data and things of that nature, which it was not necessarily communication, but it's like communication and it helps inform. And we pull in some like CRM level data, not necessarily like notes, but the like revenue and renewal dates and things of that nature. And basically create a very holistic view of what the customer is saying, what their pain points are, what their use cases are, who's using it, what risks exist, where in the sales cycle they are. And by bringing all of that together and listening through all of the lenses consistently to what those customers are saying, we're able to get a really, really good understanding of across the business, the patterns that are happening. What objections are derailing us? What are the root causes of churn? What are the competitive threats, and what do our best salespeople say to react to that? What are the product features that are actually stopping demos from converting? All of that we're able to then pull in and also include the actual source data where the customer said it, so that no one has to believe our analysis. We give you the analysis and then we give you the underlying data, and it's almost like you were on the call and on the email.
How do you balance individual customer feedback versus my portfolio aggregated feedback? Because if you're talking about strategic decisions for a SaaS company, I'm probably going to look more at that aggregated, portfolio view. I want to know, hey, everybody says they need the, Adobe Experience Manager plugin, whatever it is, right? I mean, so but one customer is asking for something unique. That's maybe more of a one-off. Maybe they can help cover the dev cost, whatever. But how does your platform? Can I get a smaller, customer by customer view, or can I do the whole thing? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think both of them are important. I would add a third, which is aggregated, but across a segment, like your enterprise customers or your North America customers, because the feedback you're going to get from enterprise versus mid-market is going to be very different. The way our platform handles it is we give it to you at the most granular level, which is at the account level. We give it to you at the segment level, and we give it to you across the entire business. And for whatever use case you're trying to solve for, we help you understand it. So for instance, you're considering an acquisition that would basically beef up your mid-market motion, then you're probably going to want to look at feedback around that pain point for your mid-market and exclude the others. And you can do that. But if you're basically building an account plan or looking at churn risk or doing win-loss analysis on a specific account, you need to be able to look at it granularly. And similar, if you're looking to understand sort of competitive threats, you probably want to look at it across the whole business. So our platform lets you do it at the smallest level, at the segment level, and across the entire customer base.
Awesome. Does Backengine use it?
Oh my God, yes. Okay. We are obsessed with our own product. One of the cool things we do is and most of our customers do this, is we actually pipe in the feedback as it's coming into Slack. So when customers start talking about like competitive threats, that starts coming in. When they start talking about like testimonials, when they start talking about accuracy, like it's funneling into the right places. And like our whole company is in there and adding comments, notes, like we're collaborating. It's basically like our operating system for running the business. Any product we build out, we're building the PRD off of what we're seeing in Backengine. Any account plan we build out, any QBR, everything we do is basically rooted in Backengine, and it's been a huge accelerant for us.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit. I think you did a survey of about 150 SaaS founders, and you had some pretty interesting insights that came out of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like intuitively, having done this thing a few times, it was just very intuitive to me that if you understand and hear and listen to your customer, you will do better as a business. But I wanted to understand if there was data behind that. And so the idea around the survey was to figure out, do companies that take customer feedback more seriously perform better, or is there no real reason to do it other than it feels good? And so what we did is we asked 150 B2B companies two sets of questions. Question number one was, how do you collect feedback? So it was like, do you collect NPS? Do you collect CSAT? Do you meet with customers? How often? Which teams are meeting? Are you recording calls? All of those things to try and understand the maturity of their feedback collection and dissemination. So it's not enough to collect it, but like spreading it across the organization. And then the second set of questions were all about performance. So we wanted to understand growth rates, retention rates, we wanted to understand win rates. We wanted to understand the success of product launches. We really wanted to get a full understanding of the different success measures. And what we did is we basically bucketed based on the feedback maturity into 4 stages. You could be all the way at the beginning stage, which we call beginner. And that's like, you're really not doing much other than talking to some customers and having some very, very informal processes, all the way to the very, very expert, which is you have a systematic and programmatic way of both collecting all of the customer feedback and then disseminating it across the organization. And what we found was a clear correlation between how far up the maturity chain you were in your feedback collection and dissemination practices and how you perform across pretty much every single metric. It was your competitive win rates and your the success of your product launches and your net revenue retention and your growth rate, everything, customer satisfaction, everything goes up. And it was so stark and dramatic. And it makes sense if you care about these things, like, and you collect it and you understand your customer, you're going to build a better experience. It's like the restaurant where basically customers come in and no one asks them how things are going and no one listens, and like people don't like the food and it never changes. And it's just the same shitty restaurant day in and day out. And the other restaurant that's obsessed with listening to customers. And when a dish isn't resonating, they take it off the menu. And when the prices are feeling not great, you figure out how to like reshuffle things. And if the people are complaining about the music being too loud, you lower it. And all of a sudden you're creating a great experience and people start coming back. And it's the same thing with business. If you don't care, you're not going to build the right experience. You won't get new customers. You won't retain your customers. Your business is going to slow. And so I think like really it ends up being the basis for so much of what success looks like.
How involved is it to deploy the platform? And then, I mean, you must have some training in terms of the application of the, when you collect all that signal. So how do you analyze it?
Our system's pretty easy. We do definitely include implementation and training, and we help because more than the platform itself, it's really like a change management around a transformation around like we are going to take customer and prospect feedback very seriously. But I would say even without using our platform, like there are some very simple things that companies can do that will help them move up that maturity curve. Like the first three things I would do is I would make sure there's an owner for customer feedback. Most companies do not have a real owner. So like 23% of companies have no owner and 53% have they say CS is the owner, but it's not really an owner. It's just something that because CS teams talk to customers a lot, they're kind of responsible for it, but they're not measured on it. They're not gold on it. They don't have resources. So first thing I would do is I would just assign someone at the company to be like, your job, it's not your full-time job. It can be a part-time, but you are responsible for making sure that we as an organization are hearing the voice of the customer. That's one thing. Second thing I would do is I would make sure that the CEO talks to customers at least once a week. Once a week, they're talking to at least one customer. We saw that companies that did that outperformed companies where the CEO talked to customers less, and it was pretty dramatic. So second thing, very simply, just make sure the CEO is talking to customers. And then third is whoever you assign as the owner, just make sure that once a week they're writing a very informal email. The things we heard from prospects and customers this week are, and then just send it out. It could be 1 or 2 paragraphs, send it out to the entire company. Those 3 things you start to do, everything starts to change.
No, I think that's some great advice. You're the second person I talked to today that said that CEO and maybe the head of marketing should be out meeting with customers on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's just you're getting everything secondhand. Mm-hmm. I also think it signals to the customers that they're important. That if the CEO is out there meeting them, the customers appreciate that. What do you do? I'm wondering if you have the capability, because a lot of companies are doing business in other markets. Maybe Spanish speaking, maybe, it could be somewhere in Asia. Are you able to listen in or provide feedback if the conversations aren't in English?
Absolutely. Yeah. So because we're inherently an AI company and we use that large language model so heavily, we're able to intake in any language and translate to any language. And we have customers that are using us in all sorts of different languages in Asia and all sorts of different places. And it's built into the product. That's one of the really cool things about large language models is this is basically now a free capability.
That's another thing that I hear. I spent a fair amount of time in the translation or localization industry. And one of the common threads these days is translation's free. It's free. There are obviously examples where you want to hire a professional linguist to either do the translation or check, but for a huge percentage of the content that we see on a day-to-day basis, it's free. You still need to pay companies and project managers and all that. So it's not like you're saying, hey, the industry doesn't exist, but it's definitely evolving. So where do you guys go from here?
Well, we're trying to evangelize this really, really important topic, in my opinion, that customer feedback matters and that B2B businesses specifically need to do a better job of listening. And the cool thing is that as we continue to build out the product and ingest more and more of this data, we're finding that there's opportunities to build really, really powerful agentic tools on top of all of this data. So beyond it analyzing, like for instance, why we lose deals, we can also embed those findings directly into the agents that help you build out account plans and help you build basically interact with those different accounts. And we can then also be monitoring each account for objections that we know derail deals and coach. And we can just build all sorts of stuff to help operationalize the really, really deep insights that we're finding. And to me, that's a very exciting future and where a lot of our product development is focused.
Do you ever have any pushback from customers? Okay, I'm talking about you or your customers when they're using Back Engine. Do customers ever say, "Hey, we don't like you guys listening in on this"? And if they do push back, how do you respond?
Yeah. So we're only grabbing things that are already being recorded. So if you don't want something being in Back Engine, like just don't record it. But even within that, we have a whole bunch of like enterprise level security controls and permissions. So you can blacklist people. You can say, I don't want any call with the CEO pulled in. I don't want these people pulled in. I only want, by definition, we only pull things in that are with a customer. So it has to be from the company and the customer. So no like chats with friends or colleagues or internal stuff gets pulled in. And then we have a whole bunch of permissions around who can see the conversations as they come in. And so there's a lot of security and privacy built into the platform. And generally what we find is like when companies are talking to customers, that is institutional knowledge that they want to institutionalize. And so there's really not that much sensitivity other than understanding that there are certain people whose calls should not be pulled in or emails shouldn't be pulled in, which we respect, and that it has to be customer communications, and that we have to make sure that there's provisions and controls that the company can apply to make sure that, you know, if you need separation between the account team on Coke and the account team on Pepsi, you can build that in, and that so we support all of that. But generally, we haven't heard a lot of pushback around customer communications.
Awesome. I'm just, thinking as we go along here, that one application of this could really help with the leadership of sales teams. So, for example, sometimes salespeople tend to be overly optimistic, or sometimes they're just incentivized to tell you that I've got this big deal in the pipeline, and tell me it's going to close soon and it's going to be huge, and you have a couple options at that point. You say, well, why don't you set up a call? And back in, prior days, it'd be like set up a meeting, which means you got to get out there and go out there, and you kind of have to maybe put the customer on the spot a little bit, but you can ask some discovery questions. But you can avoid all that by just looking at the conversations that have taken place and the analysis of that, right? I mean, so that's would be hugely helpful. The other application I'm thinking is, one of the risk factors of when you lose a salesperson, you lose them because they leave or because you need to get rid of them, is all of those customer conversations that they've had in the past. And it's tough to go in there unless, you try to, for your more important customers, make sure that there's not just one point of potential failure. You have, several people have relationships with them, but it's tough to capture all those conversations that have happened in account history. And then maybe you even have a new sales manager who comes in who has no track record with those customers. This solves a huge part of that problem. I mean, you've got, for however long they've been using the platform, you've got all those records there. And it's not dependent upon a salesperson typing them into a CRM, which most salespeople hate doing. So, and they're not very good at it. Yeah.
No, I completely agree on both points. Like you can come into the platform and either have it automatically do a deal review on every single deal in the pipeline and give you an objective view of how it's doing, or you could just go into the deals account page and just say, what are the big risks, or are we really close to signing this? And do we have a champion? And it will answer that question. And yeah, you're right. We're institutionalizing the knowledge that's in people's heads and in people's inboxes and in people's memory, and making it super easy for anyone to come in cold to an account and be able to interact with them like they know exactly what's happening. even if you have multi-threaded, multiple teams, like everyone is on the same page. It really is an accelerant.
Awesome. Well, hey, it sounds like a platform that everybody who's running a B2B type of sales organization should be, not just SaaS companies, but anybody who's interacting with B2B customers would benefit from. Tell me a little bit about your business. How big are you guys? What's, where are you going from here?
Yeah, we've raised about $4 million. We are, we've been in market. So we've been building the company for about 2 years. We've been in market for about 7 months or so. And before that, we were for about a year in design partnership with customers, just listening really closely to them and building a product. We've grown really fast. We've got dozens of companies that are using us. And yeah, it's been really fun to build. It's definitely been the most fun I've had professionally.
Well, congratulations on that success. Where do you go to stay kind of aware of technologies and trends that could affect the business that you're trying to build?
I mean, I'm all over X. I'm all over like all these newsletters that I subscribe to, LinkedIn. The space is moving so fast that I have to constantly just be on top of everything. And I just have to I just have to ingest a lot of it. So it's everywhere. But yeah, X and LinkedIn and newsletters are probably the 3 primary sources.
Awesome. Well, hey, Eli, enjoyed the conversation, and I have to give it a look. we're a little bit small, but we're at the point right now that most of our interactions are, if there's anything critical at all, I'm involved in customer meetings, but we're almost on the point where that's not scalable. And it's already not scalable for our CTO, because he's getting pulled in many different directions and so on. But I could see definitely many applications and many benefits from a platform like Back Engine. And like to wish you and your team an amazing, successful end or second half of 2025.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.